Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here. I got another Master Duel video for you. So the other day we had an official update from Konami regarding our next ban list, the one that's going to apply here in Season 16, starting on April 9th, which is likely around the time we're going to see our next major selection pack as well, which is more than likely going to have, you guessed it, tier limits. So in that regard, we still don't know at the time that I'm recording this the official contents of that pack. So speculating in the future as far as that goes is still not something that we can do with absolute certainty at this point. However, when it comes to this ban list and the implications of it, we can absolutely begin to speculate on that. So this will be an analysis of the most recent ban list update for Master Duel, which applies on April 9th, and the implications for the upcoming meta. So I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's just go straight into it. I really want to start talking about Skill Drain, Rivalry, and Gozen match. So, funnily enough, I was already thinking about making kind of an essay-style video like this about Floodgates anyway. And then Konami actually went and limited 3 of them on this list. Now, given the popularity of Runick Stun, not just lately in the Duelist Cup and in the second stage, but in general, I did expect something to happen with the Floodgates relatively soon, but I definitely was not expecting to see all 3 of these cards going to 1. So, this is a major consistency and power hit to many back row base decks, including Runick, Eldritch, and Stun decks. So, when I talk about consistency and power hits, mainly the difference between those two is that when you hit cards on the ban list, there's really 2 different reasons to do it. To either impact the, well, consistency or power level of the deck. The consistency is something that is, when they hit that, it's not necessarily taking away from the deck's core strategy, but rather the ease and ability of the deck to operate on that core strategy. Whereas a power hit is a hit to a deck's core strategy that will cause it to just function differently. So this is a bit of both, actually, because we're seeing these cards go to 1. Not only are these back row based decks going to see these Floodgates less often, but in addition to that, they now have to find either other Floodgates or some other kind of trap cards that will help bring up the difference of losing 3 of their best cards here. And Skill Drain, Rivalry, and Gozen do tend to be 3 of the best cards in pretty much any given deck that they're in. These Floodgate cards are more impactful in Master Duel due to the best of 1 format that's used for Ranked Ladder and for the Duelist Cup. This will severely limit Duelist's ability to get rid of them, not just in terms of, like, drawing the out during 1 game as opposed to 3, but it's also very much something that's based in deck building as well, right? We see that in deck building, in a best of 3, you can side like 3 Cosmic Cyclone, 3 Lightning Storm, and a Heartbeast Feather Duster if you really want to, for decks that are running cards like these, but that's not really an opportunity that we always have in Master Duel. If you want to play that kind of response, you have to put it in the main deck, which of course is going to severely hamper your deck's consistency and also ability to play against decks that are not back row based. So, yeah, in a best of 1 format, like in a best of 3 format, like TCG and some OCG events, these are probably just fine to be at 3. Skill Drain maybe a little bit less than others, but most Floodgates are fine to be at 3 because, they might take game 1 by, setting up with these Floodgates, but games 2 and 3 then become a lot more difficult when they have very targeted hate sighted in against them. Again, in best of 1, we're not afforded that luxury, and you kind of have to either, like, play a Feather Duster or maybe some other back row hate, or just kind of accept that every now and then you're just going to lose to a Floodgate deck. But thankfully, with these limits, that's going to be happening a little bit less often. Overall, this is a great change for the health of the format. There's still quite a few options for Floodgates out there. There can be only 1, Summon Limit. Other ones I didn't have listed here include like Kaiser Coliseum, Necro Valley, Macrocosmos, and Dimensional Fissure, so on and so forth. So I think that limiting the more powerful ones here is fine. It's funny too, in a lot of the discussion I've seen about Floodgates getting limited, I thought people would be overjoyed, but I feel like I'm seeing as many people overjoyed as I am seeing people say, well, they still didn't limit, there can be only 1. Which one, it's like, of course, that's such a Yu-Gi-Oh! Player thing, to like, see these 3 cards get limited and then immediately complain about another card that didn't get hit. 2, I think there can only be 1 is probably fine at 2 if all these cards are at 1. There can be only 1 is actually kind of format dependent in how good it is. To be fair, sometimes Rivalry and Gozen are as well. But they tend to be a little bit more generally applicable than something like there can be only 1. There can be only 1, there are sometimes just metas where that card doesn't do anything. Like, I mean, if you think about Branded Despia, that's a deck that's, you know, arguably one of, if not the best deck right now, and There Can Be Only One really does not do much against that deck. So if there are a lot of decks like that use a huge variety of different monster types, then There Can Be Only One just doesn't really see as much play anymore. And also, to be fair, a lot of the strength of There Can Be Only One was that sometimes, you know, they'd combine it with Rivalry to make it so both players can only have one monster pretty much like period. So that becomes less consistent with this change as well. The next limit that we're going to see here is going to be to Herald of Orange Light. This is a power hit to many decks that utilize the Ishizu cards, namely the Chaos and Branded variants. So this was something that I honestly should have predicted in my, well, ban list prediction video, because both the TCG and OCG have limited this card, and I did think this was going to happen. I just wasn't sure if it was going to happen this soon, but this limit makes a lot of sense to me. Herald of the Orange Light, as I mentioned, you know, was limited in both TCG and OCG for the same reason, so it makes sense to hit it here as well, because the ability to negate and destroy a monster effect, also triggering the Ishizu cards from your hand, and this thing is a tuner as well. These three factors make Herald of Orange Light an extremely powerful card. I think this hit is 100% warranted. To be fair, you can always make the argument that the Ishizu card is the problem here, not Herald of Orange Light, and I honestly agree with that, but, you know, it's of course still going to be too early for Konami to hit the Ishizu cards. They just came out. I don't necessarily agree that that should be the case, but that's what Konami is going to do. And, you know, this card was also pretty annoying in the Drytron Herald decks. We saw it be not really oppressive, but definitely a force there as well. I don't know, Herald of Orange Light, I feel like it's one of those cards that, like, okay, maybe without the Ishizus, it's not that bad, but, like, at the same time, it feels like it's just waiting for another really good fairy archetype to come around to just be a force again. So I'm totally fine with this card ending up at 1 copy here. Alright, sorry about that, just had to check something real quick. Okay, so the next limit that we are going to take a look at here is going to be Floowandereeze and the Magnificent Map. This was one that I actually did call on my prediction list, so I don't know, I'm not necessarily like happy to see it here. I don't think this card necessarily needed to get hit, but at the same time I can see why it was. Floowandereeze, the Magnificent Map, is going from 2 to 1. This is going to be a relatively minor consistency hit to Floowandereeze, and I call it a minor consistency hit because of the deck's ability to still search this card fairly consistently with both the Advent of Adventure and Terraforming. Though not particularly impressive, Floowandereeze has managed to stay around tier 2 despite multiple hits across multiple ban lists, which might be why Konami is trying to lower its consistency just a smidge once again. This is also another change that is going to be reflective of the OCG ban list, which is actually true for a lot of these changes, including Skill Drain to 1. Skill Drain actually just went from 3 to 1 on the latest OCG list that came out a few days ago at the time I'm recording this, and now it seems that indeed the same has happened here in Master Duel. This, honestly, in my opinion, is going to be somewhat of a preemptive hit, similar to when they put Dimension Shifter to 2, in anticipation of the deck seeing much more play when tier limits come into Master Duel. As far as how I feel about, you know, should we pre-hit a deck that's a counter to an upcoming meta force, I don't think so, honestly. Like, I really think Magnificent Map could have stayed at 2. I also think Dimension Shifter could have stayed at 3. And it not only would have been fine, but maybe even a good thing. We'll have to really see, 1, when tier limits come in, if they get pre-hit at all, and 2, how the meta ends up shaping around that as a result, to see just how powerful Dimension Shifter based decks like Floowandereeze do end up being, but I honestly think that those changes did not need to be made before tier limits came in. I think we should have, especially Dimension Shifter to 3, I think we should have had that card at 3 for at least a little while tier limits are a thing. And this is coming from someone who's going to play tier limits and probably not that many Dimension Shifter decks as well, mind you. Alright, now, let's talk about another big one. Runick Tip and Runick Fountain. Both of these cards went to 2, which very, very much surprised me. When they put 4 of the Runick cards to 2 in the last list, I mean, I even said it in my prediction video where I had this thought process of like, I don't even know what they're going to do now. I honestly don't even really know what's going to happen moving forward with Runick, because I was of the opinion that I thought it was going to be awkward to try to like semi-limit other Runick cards, or even limit them, while 4 of the Runick spells were semi-limited. I didn't think Konami was going to be willing to semi-limit that many cards, but seeing how many cards are semi-limited on the Master Duel ban list, I maybe should have anticipated that. So this is both a consistency and a power hit to, naturally, all of the different Runick variants. Oh, there we go. The decision to semi-limit a total of 6 Runick cards. 6 of this deck's cards are now at 2. It's kind of wild to me. It's a bit odd, but the total effect of all these cards going to 2, this is probably enough now to keep this deck in check. And I think this is about where Runick needs to be power level-wise, and consistency-wise. I thought, you know, in my opinion, Runick tip to 1, everything else at 3, I think the deck would be 100% fine. Maybe Fountain to 2 as well. But I am not opposed to seeing like all 6 of these cards go to 2. I also think that puts the deck about where it needs to be. Again, I just really wasn't expecting it, but Konami went and proved me wrong in that regard. Notably, these changes are going to be a much bigger blow to the quote-unquote pure Runick decks, like the Stun and Ishizu variants. Runick Sprite does still take a hit here, but less of one overall. I would expect that Runick Sprite, of all the Runick variants, is going to be the one that's quote-unquote most fine. I say quote-unquote because Runick Sprite has actually been on a very sharp decline ever since the Ishizu cards hit, from being undisputedly the top tier 1 deck of the format to now sliding down into upper, if not even mid tier 2. I think with these ban list changes, we're going to see a sharp drop in representation for Runick Sprite, because again, it was already on the decline, and now a bunch of its main cards are getting hit. However, I think that Runick Sprite will still be a tier 2 deck, you know, even after these changes, but I think it's going to see enough less play that we'll probably see it continue to slip even further down, honestly. It's funny, you know, when people complain about Ishizu cards, which, I mean, it's valid to complain about any cards you don't like, but I think it's kind of funny when I see people say that Ishizu cards, quote-unquote, ruined the meta. I think they saved it in a lot of ways. I'm not going to lie, pre-Ishizu, when Runick Sprite had like a 20+% representation of Diamond 1 decks, I was bored of that format very quickly. I very much value variety in a format. So to see the Ishizu cards come in and not only make a whole swath of decks a lot more viable, but also, due to the nature of the shufflers, then take the deck that was dominating well above the others and knock it down a few pegs, I am so in favor of that change. And of course, I'm also looking forward to see how this meta gets shaken up. However, we might see one when tier limits come out where there's a little bit less variety, but maybe there's something we can do about these tier limit cards. I'll actually be making a video about that subject a little bit later in probably a couple of days, so definitely be on the lookout for that. But in any case, let's talk about Necroface next. Oh boy, Necroface. I'm sure we've all run into this card at least once or twice and seen our entire deck get dwindled down to nothing on our opponent's first turn. This is a devastating blow to the Chaos Ishizu decks, the ones that specifically try to win by decking the opponent out. Now, Necroface from 3 to 2 is a seemingly minor hit, but putting this card to 2 actually makes it so that the deck often relies on situationally decking opponents out through use of additional less consistent means, such as card destruction, or relying on the opponent to activate a Max C. I was trying to do a little bit of research into the Chaos Ishizu mill decks to see, like, do they need 3 Necroface? And from what I can tell, there is the variant that uses the, I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I think it's Bujinki Amaterasu. The Bujinic Seas that can bring back a banished monster. I think with that monster, they can technically still mill you with only 2 Necroface, but it becomes a lot less consistent at that point. I call this a devastating blow even more than a major one. This is a devastating blow because I don't think the deck is really going to keep functioning beyond this. I could be wrong, and I really hope that I'm not, because I'm not the biggest fan of this deck, to be honest. I like the Ishizu cards, but Necroface is a little like, when people are busting out Necroface, things are never, like, really ever going to be fair at that point, so, or I guess to be fair, like, I don't know, whatever. Necroface is a relatively degenerate card. I don't really like using that word degenerate, honestly, but when a card is exclusively used for turn 1 mill strategies and nothing beyond that, I think it's fair to classify a card as something around there. Chaos Ishizu will honestly likely still see play in some form, just not as a Necroface mill deck, because honestly, there's a decent amount of time where the Chaos Ishizu decks didn't even win by decking you out, but just by generating a solid board through virtue of being a graveyard-based deck that has the Ishizu Millers and grass to set up, well, of course, everything in the graveyard. So, and in fact, one card that might help us explore Chaos Ishizu strategies that aren't centered around milling are the next card we're going to talk about. It's going to be Thunder Dragonhawk. This is a consistency boost for Thunder Dragon decks. Thunder Dragonhawk was at 1 beforehand, now it's going from 1 to 2. Thunder Dragon decks have been consistently upper rogue tier since the start of Master Duel, and don't particularly feel unfun to play against, so I think this is a great change. To be fair, when they drop Colossus, that can sometimes be a little like, ugh, but compared to a lot of other boss monsters out there, Colossus isn't that big of a deal to have to deal with. I think it's fine, at 1. At 1 specifically. When you start having multiple copies and that they get a little harder to remove, I think that can be a little dicey, but I think Thunder Dragons overall are a fine deck. They're a very fun deck from what it seems like too. Thunder Dragons are one of those decks that I'm like constantly on the cusp of building and featuring on the channel. It's just kind of one of those things where like I haven't really gotten around to it yet, but yeah, Thunder Dragons, they're rad. And like I was talking about when we were talking about Necroface, I think the simultaneous semi-limits of this card and Necroface could push the Ishizu Chaos in a direction where they focus a little more on Thunder Dragon strategies rather than decking the opponents out. So hopefully we'll see that that changed surface in the Chaos Ishizu decks. I think either way, Ishizu Chaos will see a hard dip in play, but I think this version of it could be a lot of fun and could be very interesting. Alright, so we've talked about all the cards that either went to 1 or 2. Nothing got banned on this list, by the way. I know we always call it the ban list, but nothing did actually get banned. So let's talk about what got unlimited. I'm actually going to kind of talk about most of these cards at once, because most of them, namely Altergeist Multifaker, Soul Eating Overraptor, Divine Wind of the Mist Valley, Galatea the Orcus Automaton, and Spellbook of Judgment, those 5 cards I think are totally fine to come back to 3. Divine Wind of the Mist Valley, maybe I'm missing something there. Maybe the Errata Ancient Fairy Dragon can still enable some shenanigans. To be fair, I wasn't super well versed in that FTK to begin with, but I think it's fine now to have this card at 3, and that's the only one I'm like iffy about. Of the other ones I listed, like Multifaker's fine, Altergeist are doing literally nothing, that's fine. Spellbook of Judgment, fine. This deck is doing literally nothing. And then Dinos and Orcus are like, they're very solid rogue decks, so I think giving these solid rogue decks a little more power to help them continue to compete, especially as we're seeing a lot more powerful decks come into the meta, is totally fine. There are a couple of cards here that I'm a little like about, namely Super Polymerization. I thought that was really weird to put this card to 3 from 2, because this card is very, very powerful, and we have a fusion archetype coming up that I don't know that tier limits always play Super Poly, but they definitely can. To be fair, we're missing in Master Duel Garura, which is a very generic fusion monster. The materials are just any 2 monsters with the same type and attribute but different names. That card is a TCG exclusive though, and hasn't even been released in the OCG yet. So I think that we're not going to see it in Master Duel for quite a while either. But it's still weird to move Super Poly up from 2 to 3 when we have a card like that that's on the horizon that will someday come out. And then even closer than that, we have, again, the fusion-based archetype of tier limits. So, I don't know. It's really weird. I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue right off the bat, but it's still a very weird choice to me. There's also Quick Fix to 3. This is potentially scary. Spiral's pretty much at full power right now, and of course the recent release of Illusion of Chaos also greatly aids them. Now, to be fair, they don't have Old Firewall Dragon, they don't have Grinder Golem, they don't have Gofu. So without those 3 cards, they're not like at full power again, but still, yeah, Quick Fix at 3 is scary. Machine Dupe could very much be a thing in Spiral decks again. Now, to be fair, I don't know too much about Spiral personally, but I've played against them enough to know that they're scary, and having their best starter get another copy into the deck is going to make them that much scarier. Alright, so as far as my final thoughts about this ban list, you know, like I talked about earlier, the limiting of 3 of the more powerful floodgates in the game is, excuse me, is going to be one of the more impactful changes we see here, especially in the long run. Again, I personally feel this is a good thing for the overall health of the game. Moving forward, they probably won't need to hit any more floodgates for quite a while. Again, I've seen a lot of people say that there can only be one, also needs to go to 1. I think it's fine at 2 for the time being. We'll see. We'll see if it ends up still being a problem, but I think that the floodgate-based decks have taken enough of a blow here that they probably don't need to be touched for a good little while now. The most immediate impact from this list will come from the hits to Necroface and Runick Tip and Fountain. Shizu Chaos and Runick variants will likely see a sharp decline in play. Again, I think all the Runick variants will see that sharp decline in play. Even Runick Sprite, which again I think is mostly fine as far as its power level goes. I don't think the hits really impact it that much. They only ever played 2 Fountain anyway, so losing the 1 Tip does hurt consistency a little bit, but I think still the loss of these cards is going to make people less willing to play Runicks overall. So I think even though, again, Runick Sprite should still be fine, that too will still see a sharp decline in play. Some notable cards that didn't get hit that probably should have are Fairy Tail Snow and Block Dragon. I'm really surprised Fairy Tail Snow didn't go to 1. I honestly did not expect them to ban Block Dragon, even though I love Adamancipator, and I think that they should hit Block Dragon. I still wasn't really expecting them to do it. Fairy Tail Snow surprised me a little bit. I guess it makes more sense to address Necroface because, well, because that card's a super and Snow is an ultra, let's be real. Yeah, I don't know. Those cards really should have been hit and they weren't. That's kind of my 2 cents on that. But honestly, I think that overall this is a fairly good list. I think it'll lead to an overall healthy meta, not only now, but in the future when we see tier limits come in as well. Yeah, I think that this is a pretty solid list. Map to 1 is a little weird, expected but weird. Super Poly from 3, or to 3 from 2 was very, very weird. And Quick Fix to 3 is a little scary, but those are my only 3 big criticisms, I think, of this ban list. And honestly, I call them big criticisms, but they're relatively minor. I think those 3 things are ultimately totally fine. Super Poly, maybe less so. And maybe Quick Fix, I don't know. We'll see what ends up panning out, but yeah, those are my thoughts on the ban list. Thank you all very much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Of course, I am, as always, as ever, really looking to hear what your thoughts are in the comments, so we can generate some good discussion there. But yeah, that's going to be all for now. Let's just go and move now to our outro. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack. You'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation. You do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot, as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now. So without further ado, this is Xlex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.